Hi, everyone. Welcome. We will give people a minute to jump on and get situated, and then we will start in about 30 seconds. Thanks so much for being here. All right, so we will go ahead and jump in. Hi, Lily. I see you in the chat. Hello, nice to see you. Nice to see everybody. Thanks so much for joining our webinar today. This is a part of a new series we're offering this year called our Walk, Ride, Enroll series, and our kickoff session today is all about the basics of Safe Routes to School. So this is really an introduction to Safe Routes to School, as a program. We'll talk about kind of the basic framework of Safe Routes to School and all of those, kind of like introductory Safe Routes to School 101 elements that you need to know in order to get your program up and running. So for those of you who might be new to Safe Routes Partnership, we are a national organization, and our mission is to advance safe walking and rolling to both schools and also everyday destinations for people of all races, income levels, abilities, disabilities, with the overarching goal of building healthy and thriving communities for everyone. So if you are new to our organization, welcome. If you know us already, nice to see you again. Thanks so much for being here. Just a quick few housekeeping items before we jump in. This session will be recorded, and we will send out a copy of the recording and the presentation slides after the session, so keep an eye out for that. We'll also send out a survey. And you're also welcome to participate in the chat box. So if you want to, jump in and say hello, some of you have already gotten started, which is great. Please feel free to use the chat box. There's also a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. It'll say Q&A. If you have any questions, put them in the Q&A box. That way we can separate just the comments in the chat from the Q&A questions. And we'll have some time at the end to go through the Q&A. So chatting's for chatting, and if you have specific questions, please drop them in the Q&A box. So just a quick introduction from me. My name is Corey Johnson. I'm a she, her pronouns, and I'm the Program and Engagement Manager here at Safe Routes Partnership. I've been here for about 4.5 years now, and I'm based in Washington, D.C. And a lot of my work is actually around supporting Safe Routes to School programs. So I get to work with a lot of wonderful people all across the country who are doing amazing work with Safe Routes to School. So some of you have already gotten started saying hello in the chat. Please feel free to do so. Introduce yourselves, share where you're from. I know that one thing that I love about Safe Routes to School is that, we get people from all over. So I see people already in the chat box from Texas and New York and California, Oregon, Ohio. So I love that we have all these different communities coming together, and that we're all doing, very, very similar work. So thank you all so much for being here. And again, please continue to say hello in the chat and share where you're joining us from today. So I want to start with a little quick poll just to get a sense of who's in the audience so we can get to know each other a little better. And I'd like to know from you all, how did you get to school growing up? So I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll. If you want to take a minute and yeah, just let me know. Think back to riding the bus or walking in the snow or jumping on the subway. I'd like to know how you all got to school when you were growing up. I know for me, I grew up in the suburbs of Maryland, and I went to school in a different district, so I always got driven to school, but I was so jealous of the bus riders. Like, I thought that riding the bus was just the coolest thing. I'm thinking back to it, like thinking back to the kid who I was, I probably would not have enjoyed the bus, but there was just like this mythology of the bus and how cool it seemed, but I did not get a chance to do that. So, all right, take about 10 more seconds. We'll keep this open. We have quite a mix, actually. Lots of people were walking, some bike riders, some people who were on the bus, some people in the car. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and share these results here. So we have quite a mix, and actually a lot of people were able to walk to school, which is awesome. So thanks for participating in that poll. So I asked you that question because we're actually going to start off just we're talking about what Safe Routes to School is. And, for those of you, again, who are kind of new to Safe Routes to School, it's basically a movement and a program to make school travel so that can include walking, biking, kids are on scooters and skateboards, safe and convenient and fun for children of all ages, races, abilities, disabilities. So I kind of asked you about your school travel because a lot of our conversation today is about, creating safe pathways for students to walk and roll to school, mainly. So we know that school travel trends have changed a lot over the years. Thinking back to like the 1960s, nearly 50% of all kids walked or biked to school. And today, that number is definitely a lot lower, around 13% of students are walking and biking to school. So there's definitely been a dramatic shift and a downward trend in students who are able to walk or bike to school. And that can be for lots of different reasons, from cultural trends to infrastructure to where we actually build schools. So there's definitely reasons for that drop. We also know that family car trips make up a lot of morning congestion. I'm sure that a lot of you have seen either in person or images or videos of those long car loop rides, those long car loop lines, in the morning when students are getting dropped off, or in the afternoon when students are getting picked up. And we also know that injuries and fatalities are especially high in lower income neighborhoods. So again, along with just like the decrease in students who are walking and rolling to school, we also see some troubling trends around both that car traffic and then also the injuries and fatalities that are impacting students. Again, a lot of students disproportionately impacted in lower income communities. So Safe Routes to School is actually one solution. It's not the only solution to solving some of these issues, but it's definitely one that is a proven and an evidence-based solution for increasing rates of students who are walking and biking to school and rolling to school. We've also seen Safe Routes to School programs result in a 45% to 75% decrease in pedestrian injuries around schools, near school campuses. And we also find that Safe Routes to School is a great way to encourage more students to be physically active. So getting out and walking or rolling to school is something that's a big part of a Safe Routes to School program. And we've seen that Safe Routes actually does help increase rates of students being physically active before after school. So thinking about some of the benefits of Safe Routes to School, and there are many, as you can see here. I think that each program and each community might be motivated or inspired by a different benefit. But some of the ones that we've kind of called out as far as benefits of Safe Routes to School, one is just community connectedness. And that especially the past few years, when there have been students who've been at home and doing remote learning and not being able to be with friends or family all the time, being able to use Safe Routes to School and the opportunity to walk or ride to school with your friends or peers is a way to help kind of build that social connectedness. Students can make friendships and just build those positive relationships between students, schools, and also neighbors in the school community. There are also some environmental benefits like, climate benefits, having cleaner air, reduced car emissions, even students having, lowering asthma rates and lowering risk of asthma attacks due to some of the pollution and car emissions, better academic performance. So being able to walk or ride to school and then, getting ready, for the school day, being ready to learn and less distracted, more focused, being able to walk or ride to school can definitely put students in that, in that state, ready to learn state. Of course, there are also traffic safety benefits. So, reducing the number of cars on the road will also help reduce the risk of a student being, being hit, or even a community member, being hit or seriously injured due to a traffic incident around the school campus. And there are also more chances for students to learn and practice road safety. So how do you cross the street? How do you use a crosswalk? How do you interact with a crossing guard? How do you ride a bike to school? All of those things are part of Safe Routes to School as well. And a few other benefits, even just like personal safety. So, safe routes to school can lead to better street design and better lighting, which definitely can improve both perceptions of safety and also overall safety. And also less harassment, bullying, or violence in walking to school. If there are students who can walk in groups or walk with adults, that can help lower some of those incidences. School transportation cost, can also be a benefit of safe routes to school. So not having to pay for either gas to drive to school, which I know that we all would all like to save more money on gas, or just not having to pay for a large bus fleet to bus students to school. So those cost saving elements are also really helpful. And then also just having healthier students overall. So students who are more physically active, who are less at risk for chronic illnesses or diseases, is another benefit of, safe routes to school and promoting more students walking and biking. So moving on to how safe routes programs are organized. So I will say, you'll probably hear me say this a few times this afternoon, but no two safe routes to school programs look the same. So there are many different structures, lots of ways to organize your program, and it's really about finding the best structure and organization model for your community and in your situation. So at a local level, safe routes programs are organized either by cities, counties, some are just individual schools, school districts, or community organizations even will run safe routes to school programs. So these are programs that can serve like a single school, just one campus, or many schools throughout a community, throughout a county, throughout a city. It really just depends on the scale of the program. And then at a state level, safe routes programs are usually administered by a state Department of Transportation, so DOT. And so in this model, the program is usually provided, the state DOT will provide resources to help support the local programs. They might have a safe routes to school coordinator, they might provide education materials or grant funding, or other resources that can help those people who are working locally get their programs up and running and running efficiently and effectively. So another big part of safe routes to school is the 6 E's framework. And this is kind of like the foundation for any safe routes to school program. So we call them the 6 E's because they all start with the letter E, and each one is equally important to a comprehensive safe routes to school program. So the 6 E's are engagement, equity, encouragement, engineering, education, and evaluation. So we definitely recommend that safe routes programs take a comprehensive approach as far as 6 E's are concerned. There are definitely some programs that focus more on certain E's over other E's. So there are some programs that are really focused on engineering and might do like a little bit of encouragement programming. There are other programs where they're really into education and encouragement and might do some engineering. So again, it just depends on your program structure, your program model, what you need in your community. We definitely recommend touching on each one of the 6 E's to get in order for your program to be as effective as it can be. So just diving into the E's a little bit more to let you know what each one looks like. So engagement is really just, talking with students, families, neighbors, school staff, and engaging them in safe routes to school. I think the great thing about this program is that it really provides opportunities for the community to shape the program. So getting feedback from, parents and caregivers and students about, about their routes to school, about how they get to school, about what they would like to see, about improvements they would like to see, involving them in different program activities. All of these things are part of a safe routes to school program. Next is equity. So I mentioned earlier that, there are students in, lower income neighborhoods are disproportionately impacted by, by injuries and fatalities on their trips to school. And so at Safe Routes to School, as far as the program is concerned, we really stress working with, students who might be more, at risk for, being impacted by traffic violence, communities that might not have the infrastructure needed to support safe walking and biking, lack of sidewalks, lack of bike lanes. So we definitely encourage safe routes practitioners to, focus on equity in all of their programs and think about students who might be most impacted. Next is engineering. So we know that, a big part of being able to walk or roll safely and comfortably to school relies on the engineering around your school campus. So do you have painted crosswalks? Do you have sidewalks? Do you have bike lanes? Do you have, proper wayfinding signage? Do you have curb cuts? All of these things are a part of making the route to school, safer and more walkable or rollable. So engineering is also a big component of a safe routes to school program. And then there are also these encouragement activities. So we just celebrated Walk to School Day 2022 a few weeks ago. This is a photo from last year's celebration. But being able to give people, just an opportunity to get excited about walking and rolling to school, and having those activities that are just both fun and uplifting and inspiring, and really motivate people to walk or roll to school. This is also great for people who might be a bit hesitant about walking or rolling to school. These encouragement events can really help get people a bit more comfortable around the idea of walking or rolling to school, because it might be new for some people. So encouragement is another really important piece of this. And the next is education. So to go along with encouragement, just making sure that people have the skills they need to walk or roll to school. So these are students who are doing a bike rodeo course on a traffic garden here by me in DC. So being able to make sure that students know, how to put on a helmet properly, or, the different rules of the roads, bike, hand signals while you're biking, how to cross a crosswalk, how to navigate some of the infrastructure that might be in their community. All of those things are part of making sure that students are safe as they're traveling to school. And then lastly, evaluation. So sitting down and, collecting that data and seeing, is your program actually making a difference? Are you having an impact? Are more students actually walking or rolling to school? If they are, great. Keep it up, and if they aren't, or if they're needing modifications, you can use that time to, think about some other things that need to be done, whether it's more community engagement, whether it's more, different educational materials, whether it's outreach to new neighborhoods. I think that evaluation really helps inform what your program will actually look like. So that is a bit about the 6 E's framework, and I'm going to pause just for a moment to see if there are any questions here. I see Michelle is typing some answers in the chat box as well. And like I mentioned at the top, some of you might have missed it, but we will be sharing the presentation slides, and we will share the recording as well. So that'll be sent out after the presentation. Okay, so a bit more about how Safe Routes to School programs are organized. So like I mentioned just now, there are some programs that are really focused on engineering and infrastructure, and there are other programs that are focused on non-infrastructure, and there are some programs where it's kind of like a hybrid, so a mix of both. So when you think about infrastructure projects, we're talking about things like sidewalk construction, bike lanes, speed reduction, curb extension, projects that are, really related to street design and changing the infrastructure on the road. Those non-infrastructure activities might include things like Walk and Roll to School Day, like I just mentioned, walking school bus programs, bike trains, walking Wednesdays, just things that don't require infrastructure improvements that will actually change the infrastructure elements on the street. So just a few, quick tidbits about Safe Routes to School infrastructure projects, and that's something that some of you might be thinking about now with some of the infrastructure funding that's available and all these new Safe Routes to School grants. A lot of people are kind of thinking about, okay, what types of infrastructure improvements are needed around our school campuses? How can we make this a safer environment for students to walk and roll to school? So engineering is important just because it, again, increases safety and comfort, encourages parents and caregivers to let their students walk to school. Like there's some parents and they're, they might say, I don't have sidewalks on my street. I'm not going to let my child walk to school with no sidewalks. So that infrastructure can help encourage people to feel more comfortable with walking and rolling. It also gives road users different travel options. So, making sure that students can bike if they want to or walk if they want to. And then, as I mentioned earlier, some of these other benefits around reducing traffic congestion, lowering the transportation cost, helping students get ready to learn, and, you know, even like that social connectedness piece, being able to walk on a sidewalk with your friends, and also the equity piece as well, just, you know, making sure that students can have, you know, have sidewalks and bike lanes and safe places to walk and roll. So here are a few examples of different infrastructure improvements that you know, might be included in a Safe Routes to School project. Things like speed tables, speed humps, speed bumps, traffic circles. All of these are different infrastructure improvements that could be a part of Safe Routes to School. Even things like high visibility crosswalks could be a part of a Safe Routes to School you know, infrastructure program. You know, things like raised medians or mid-block crossings, all of those, if they're around a school campus, could be a part of an infrastructure project for Safe Routes to School program. Even something like pedestrian signaling, rapid flashing beacons, hawk signals. I know I've seen a lot of these, you know, here in my neighborhood around school campuses. So there are lots of different elements that might be involved in a Safe Routes to School infrastructure project. I will point you all to this resource. We do have a very comprehensive engineering guide specifically for Safe Routes to School projects. So this guide covers engineering strategies that work to keep kids safe. It talks about different, you know, different street improvements, different engineering solutions. We have different cost considerations, safety outcomes, even opportunities for things like public art, which can also be a part of a Safe Routes to School infrastructure project, and also some engineering case studies. So communities who've implemented Safe Routes to School engineering projects and have found some success. And again, this will be sent out, so you'll be able to click on the link and go to the guide and check out some infrastructure improvements that have been connected to Safe Routes to School programs. And we also have our education and encouragement activities. So again, these are the ones that don't involve infrastructure. So not all Safe Routes to School programs have to involve infrastructure projects. You know that infrastructure projects can sometimes be expensive or take a long time, or it's a long process to actually get things up and running. So it's not that those projects aren't important, but education and encouragement is also a way to get a program up and running without you know, having to go through the long process of getting an infrastructure project together. So education and encouragement is just as important. And why? Because education and encouragement activities, they help build momentum, they inspire people, it helps you celebrate your success, no matter how big or small. It also increases program participation. So, you know, having a Walking Wednesday program, for example, you know, might lead to more kids walking or rolling to school, you know, just in general. So making something that's kind of big and fun and celebratory. And I mentioned earlier, it also helps build bike and pedestrian skills and raises awareness about traffic safety. So actually walking, you know, to school or riding to school and being on the ground, you see where things are dangerous. You see where cars are speeding or where the sidewalk cuts out, or where, you know, a bike lane might be a good place to, or where a bike lane might need to be included. So all of these things are a part of education and encouragement activities. And they're also just super fun. I feel like Safe Routes to School is also just a really fun program. And, you know, activities like this show why. So some examples of these activities, I mentioned walk and bike and roll to school day. Walk to school day is in October, bike to school day is in May, walking school bus programs, bike trains, bike rodeos, walk audits, remote drop off and pick up. So we know that there are some students who just can't walk to school. Either they just live too far away or just can't walk for other reasons. So setting up a drop-off zone close to the school campus where kids can maybe take the bus or get driven to school. You get dropped off a few blocks away, and then you walk or roll, you know, the last few blocks or, you know, few streets to school. I think the great thing about education and encouragement activities is that you can really customize them to fit your community. So you can, you know, organize these events in whatever way you see fit. You can involve your school mascot. You can involve community partners. You can invite elected officials to come do things. You can have volunteers come out to help with different activities or school staff. So this is really a chance for you to, yeah, embrace what makes your community cool and unique, and customize activities to fit whatever you need. So I'm going to pause again for a moment and just see if there are any questions here. Okay, somebody asked if they can, what's the difference between engagement and encouragement as it applies to safe routes to school? That's a really good question. So actually there's a lot of, there's a lot of overlap. I would say that, a lot of encouragement activities are engagement activities as well. When we think about encouragement, we think about like specific program activities like I just mentioned. So it might be like a, walk or roll to school day, or a bike rodeo event, or a community walking and rolling competition. Whereas engagement might be, related to, just connecting with your community partners, with families, doing things like community outreach, or even things like surveying parents and caregivers about, like their school travel trends. So there definitely is some overlap. I'd say that encouragement probably is could be more programming related based on, like depending on how you determine, how you decide to structure your activity or your program. But yeah, there's also just natural overlap. So we don't get too strict on like engagement has to be this or encouragement has to be this. Yeah, don't worry too much about putting things in those specific boxes, because there is a lot of overlap among them. Another question about if we have any resources or examples of presentations related to providing basic education to vehicles or drivers being safe around walkers or bikers. So we'll take a look at our resources. And I think that in some upcoming webinars, we'll also talk a bit about vehicles and drivers and some safety strategies and kind of what those interactions look like. So yes, we can definitely address that moving forward. All right, and keep your questions coming, please. These are all good ones. So next up, we're going to talk a bit about how to grow your Safe Routes to School program. So some of you might kind of be like in the beginning stages of putting together a Safe Routes to School program, which is great. I'm glad that you all are interested in doing that and that you're signing on to do this work. So we actually have a step-by-step guide for how to start a Safe Routes to School program, and it's called our Building Blocks Toolkit. So the Building Blocks Toolkit has just basic information about safe routes to school in general, how to start a program, initial safe routes to school activities, how to organize a safe routes to school task force or committee, even like action planning materials, and a bunch of like customizable templates and resources that you can use to start getting your program up and running. And again, this is available on our website, and we'll also send it out in our post-webinar follow-up email. And a lot of the information I'm going to be talking about today is included in the Building Blocks Toolkit. So if there's something that I might have breezed over a bit, it's definitely in the toolkit as well. So when you think about, kind of starting and growing a Safe Routes to School program, we think about these different stages to success. And we kind of use like this idea of growing a tree is our analogy. So starting your program is kind of like starting your seedling, and then your seedling starts to, develop and, starts growing stronger, to then bloom into a healthy tree, and then finally, kind of like reaching maturity and having a fully established program. So as you're kind of like starting your program, I think that's really important to give your program a good start and a good beginning. So setting some initial goals, making some initial plans for Safe Routes to School, and honestly, even just starting with some initial education or encouragement activities could be a great way to, kick off your program. So you don't even need to have like an official Safe Routes to School task force or an official program set up. If you want to celebrate Walk and Roll to School Day, you can have a Walk and Roll to School Day activity. Or if you want to start a Walking Wednesday activity, or a bike train or walking school bus, you can do that. I would say start in a place that makes most sense for you. So some of you might be ready to do that, and that's great. We'd also suggest building relationships with key partners. So obviously your school partners are key, right? Making sure that, school administrators, teachers, parents and caregivers are on board. If you're in a place where you can make some infrastructure improvements, we definitely say go for it. Again, people are in different stages as far as infrastructure is concerned. But if that's a possibility, we definitely encourage you to get those improvements up and running. And also just keep moving, just keep trying out, keep experimenting, and kind of, see how your program develops organically. Again, there's no right or wrong way to do this. So, it's not like you have to follow these steps in order. It's really about you doing what makes the most sense for the community where you're working. So the next step is developing supportive structures. So this might involve engaging more community members. So along with school staff, maybe you're talking to different community partners. Maybe you're talking to people at Department of Transportation about some infrastructure improvements. Maybe you're talking to other community partners or safe routes to school champions in the area who want to be involved on a deeper level. So in this stage, you can really start thinking about developing some sort of action plan. So, you want to start a program. What are you going to do next? What are those next steps? This is actually where a lot of programs, especially grant programs, start. So you might have funding to start a Safe Routes to School program. You might have a small team of people ready to go. And so your next step is really to put that action plan in place, right? So determine your goals and develop some next steps to really, to really get things moving. And then next, once you have your, safe routes, committee or task force ready, once you have some initial activities under your belt or some initial activity ideas, go ahead and just get started doing activities. Try to find ones that you can sustain or expand. So if there's a walking school bus program at a school, maybe you can add a few more. Or if you did walk and roll to school day, you can do walking Wednesdays, every month, as opposed to celebrating walking roll to school day just once a year. So think about opportunities to keep things moving, keep the momentum going. This is also a great time to identify permanent staffing. So we found that programs that have, a permanent Safe Routes to School coordinator, that's somebody who can really, anchor the program and manage the program, are definitely, really effective and just more sustainable in the long term. And a lot of that's related to, securing that funding, whether it's short-term or long-term funding, planning for infrastructure changes, like I mentioned earlier, making sure that, that there are that there's adequate infrastructure for students to be able to walk or roll to school. And also doing some work to address district or municipal policies. So can you, do you have a Safe Routes to School policy, on the school district level or in your community? Do you have a school wellness policy where Safe Routes to School can be incorporated into that? Do you have a Vision Zero plan or a comprehensive plan where Safe Routes to School can be, a part of that plan or policy? And then lastly, once you're kind of, up and running and a bit more on steady ground, you'll begin to start thinking about becoming a comprehensive program. So, I mentioned those 6 E's earlier. How is your program addressing each one of those E's? How can you, implement a comprehensive equity approach? So looking at your program overall and saying, oh, these are some specific, needs in this one community or few communities. How can we address safe walking and rolling to make sure that, all students are able to, to participate in that? This might also involve some larger infrastructure changes, so those larger, street redesign projects or construction projects that might take a bit more time and a bit more money. How can you start incorporating those into Safe Routes to School? And obviously evaluation. So looking at, what's worked in your program and what can you improve so that you can continue to move forward and continue to make sure that your program is sustainable and something that can really function in the long term. So that's just a, general gist of what it would look like as your Safe Routes to School program grows. And again, like I mentioned before, this is not a 4-step, program. It's not even necessarily linear. There are some programs that, change course along the way. That's totally fine. There's no right or wrong way to run your program. I'm going to pause one more time. See if there are any questions. Somebody's asking how to integrate Safe Routes to School into a school curriculum, or examples that may have worked in other Safe Routes to School programs. We can share examples of Safe Routes to School curriculum integration. We actually do, a lot of practitioners do a lot of work with PE teachers or health teachers around incorporating Safe Routes to School into a school curriculum. So we can send those out after the webinar as well. Any other questions? All right, so just a bit more about getting your program up and running and the essential components of a Safe Routes to School program. I mentioned some of these before, but just to go a little bit deeper into each one, a lot of programs kind of have a, except the head of the program is a Safe Routes to School coordinator who's supported by a Safe Routes to School task force or committee. Then there are also different program structures. Funding is a huge piece of Safe Routes to School, and then Safe Routes to School policies, which I just mentioned a minute ago. So the Safe Routes to School coordinator is kind of like the main champion of Safe Routes to School. So this is a person who manages the overall program. They'll probably lead the Safe Routes to School task force or committee. They're that person who can be like the liaison between the school district, the municipality, and other partners, other stakeholders. This person might recruit and train volunteers, manage the different school events and activities. They might be the person who's in charge of funding and evaluation. So I feel like Safe Routes to School coordinators often wear many hats. And yeah, it's just the person who's kind of like the main contact or main lead for a Safe Routes to School program. So there are some coordinators who are paid coordinators. There are some coordinators who are volunteer coordinators. Obviously a big benefit of a volunteer coordinator is that it's more affordable because they're volunteering their time and can be easier to get going just as far as paperwork and logistics are concerned. And that level of commitment, if somebody's volunteering to do this, they're probably pretty committed and passionate about Safe Routes to School and improving student safety. On the other hand, you have the paid coordinators who, just think about sustainability, might stay on for longer. A lot of volunteers might be parents or family members of students who, their student might graduate and that volunteer goes away. Whereas with a coordinator, they can be there longer term, might have more time to actually, do the job and invest in Safe Routes to School. And just might have some of like the, necessary skills or experience to manage a program like Safe Routes to School. So your Safe Routes to School task force or committee or working group, whatever you want to call it. Task force sounds so official, but it can really be whatever, kind of advisory group you want to call it. This is a group of people who can help coordinate between different partners to make sure that everything gets done. So this will involve your Safe Routes to School coordinator. It might involve, the school district, school principal, maybe a local agency, public health agency, a DOT, some local bike ped advocates, even elected officials or other local leaders. These are people who, again, are supporting the program and kind of helping to, create that action plan to move the program forward. And this is usually operating at a district or, city level, county level. So a bit of a higher level of a coordination here. So like I mentioned, this is just a, advisory body to help make decisions, move things forward, divide up work, make sure that your equity goals are being reached, and even thinking about new, Safe Routes to School policies or policy changes. All of that can be done on the task force or committee level. And next up, just kind of thinking about where your Safe Routes to School program might be housed. So, who runs Safe Routes to School? Who's who's in charge of it? What department is in charge of it? So it might be some sort of local agency. So your local DOT, your regional transportation agency, a planning department, a public health department. We have some Safe Routes to School programs that are run out of nonprofits or on a district level. There are even some that are just organized by the PTA. So it could just be community members who are starting a Safe Routes to School program. So again, it really depends on what fits the needs of your community and what makes the most sense in the context in which you're working. This decision is also often practical. So just, who's willing to, to run this program and manage it? Who has the funding, who has the staff, who has the capacity? What area do you want to focus on? So if your program is more based on, infrastructure, it might make sense for Safe Routes to School to run out of a Department of Transportation. If your program might be focused more on health outcomes, and getting kids to be more physically active, you might want to house your program in a public health department or a hospital. So it really just depends on what works best for your community, and where your program is housed will likely influence the work that you do. And also, your program structure might change. So it might depend on, funding, capacity, your program might grow. You might have programs that are kind of, different agencies, different partners are involved. So lots of different structures. There are lots of different ways to do this. There are lots of different, successful models for what this can look like. So again, it's just determining what works best for you and your community. And then a little bit about funding your program. So I feel like everybody always wants to know, like, how do you fund this? How do you make sure this can actually get done? So funding usually goes to staff salaries, infrastructure improvements, incentives. So there are people who do, bike giveaways or helmet giveaways or have Safe Routes to School swag or other incentives to make people really want to walk and roll to school. Expenses for activities. So you need walk and roll to school day or a bike rodeo. Those are activities that have costs associated with them. So funding can go towards activities and getting them up and running, and then also just general operations. So things that you need to have in place in order to run your program successfully. And just thinking about a few common funding sources. So honestly, Safe Routes to School programs, a lot of them, rely on volunteer time and people who are very dedicated champions who, might volunteer their time or, might have a small stipend or salary, and then, that might not be commensurate with the time they put into the program. But your partners and volunteers are a great asset to Safe Routes to School. There are also health funds, like I mentioned, whether it's a state grant or grant from CDC, local healthcare foundation grants, other foundation grants, business sponsorships, just general funds. And also transportation funds. So state Safe Routes to School grants. There's the Transportation Alternatives Program or TAP funding or local transportation measures. I would suggest that if you're interested in funding Safe Routes to School programs, to check out our Safe Routes Partnership Federal Policy blog. We have all kinds of posts and resources about funding Safe Routes to School programs, funding that's available now, how to access funding. I know this could be like a whole other webinar topic, so feel free to either check out our blog, check out our website, or just reach out to me afterwards. I can point you to some specific resources around funding Safe Routes to School, since that's always a big question that we get. We'd also suggest, looking into funding with your partners. So if you can, pool resources or apply for joint funding. There are like some partners that Safe Routes practitioners usually partner with or reach out to. So whether it's your Safe Kids Coalition, Parks and Rec could be a great partner, PTAs, your local bike and pedestrian organizations, walking organizations, youth organizations and sports teams can also be great partners, or even arts organizations, people who are working on public art, libraries, just anybody who's, in your community and connected and who, might care about, kids or students and keeping kids and students safe. I would say to cast your partnership net, pretty wide, because you never know who might turn up and be a really great partner and champion for Safe Routes to School. And lastly, I mentioned earlier, there are Safe Routes to School policies. So I think the great thing about a Safe Routes to School policy is that it is essential for long-term change. It does kind of institutionalize Safe Routes to School a bit more. It becomes something that's more formal and more binding. So potential safe routes to school policies can be included in school board policies, safe routes to school resolutions, complete streets policies, comprehensive plans, or school wellness policies, like I mentioned earlier. And we also have some policy resources on our website, and have done some webinars in the past around safe routes to school policies. So if you're interested, I can send out those links as well, if that's something that you want to explore in your safe routes to school work. And then lastly, or I guess not lastly, but I'll kind of breeze through these a bit so I can finish up answering all your questions, are different safe routes to school activities. I mentioned some of them earlier. And so I'm actually curious, again, I have one more poll for you all about what safe routes to school activities have you either heard of or participated in? So I'm gonna go ahead and launch our next poll. So I'm curious if any of you all participated in safe routes to school activities, if you've heard of any of these things, if you want to do any of these things. I'd like to know what activities you've been a part of. Just like out another 10 seconds. Okay, lots of walk and roll to school day action, some bike and roll to school day, bike rodeos, walk audits. Okay. Great, 5 seconds, get your last answers in. All right. So a nice mix, which is great. So it seems like some of you have either heard of some of these things, or participated in some of these things, which is awesome. Yeah, so I think you all will probably be familiar with some of the things that I'm going to talk about now. So I think that safe routes to school activities, again, are one of the big exciting things about this program. I'm just going to go through a few of these just to give you all a taste of what safe routes to school activities can be. The first is a walk and roll audit. So an audit's basically, a group of people go out and take a walk around a certain route or a few routes around a school campus, and really look for those, infrastructure like assets. So, what's already there, what's working well, and then also look for opportunities to improve infrastructure. So where are those gaps? Where are sidewalks missing? Where are there dangerous crossings? Where are there no crosswalks? And then working with your probably local DOT to see if there are any opportunities to improve the infrastructure around a school campus. And this is something that can be done, with community members, with school staff. We have students go on walk and roll audits, but this is really a chance for you to get it on the ground and see what's actually happening and what infrastructure improvements could make things safer and more comfortable for students to walk and roll. We also have arrival and dismissal observations. So just going and actually seeing what's happening when students are walking and rolling and arriving to school, and what's happening during that, during that afternoon pickup time. You can count the number of students who you see walking and rolling. You can see if there's a huge line of cars, in the car loop. Just kind of get a sense of what the scene looks like as students are walking and rolling and arriving to school, and determining if there are certain activities or interventions that can make school arrival and dismissal smoother and safer and more comfortable for people. And there's walk and roll to school day, like I just mentioned. We just had one in October, and I'm going to link, just because we are a little short on time, so I'm going to send you a link to a great walk and roll to school day celebration video that this just happened a few days ago at an elementary school right outside of DC here. And this will really give you a sense of what a walk and roll to school day celebration can be and look like. So I definitely recommend checking out that video. Bike and roll to school day is the same type of idea. So that's observed in May, and the same type of idea where students are encouraged to ride their bike to school, scoot to school, still walk to school if they want to. And there are a lot of school communities that set up celebrations for those programs as well. Next is a walking school bus program. So that's basically like a group walk along a designated route. So just like there would be a bus route. It's not an actual school bus, but it's a walking school bus or walking rolling school bus. So it's usually led by a volunteer or staff. and that person would help take the burden off of individual parents to walk their kids to school every day. So there might be a group of volunteers who rotate, and they basically, walk students to school. So there's a route, and they pick up students along the way, lead them to school, and it functions like a little mini walking school bus. So we found that walking school buses, along with just helping to build community, can also help reduce tardiness, and also can incorporate some safety education. So having an adult who's there who can show you, how to cross the street or how to ride safely, making sure that your helmet's on correctly. All of those things are benefits of having a walking school bus program. And again, this is another video that I will send out afterwards of a walking school bus program in action from this year. It's Willowbrook. I believe it's an elementary school in Illinois. It's a really short video that just kind of shows how their walking school bus program operates. You can see in a little thumbnail clip here that their parents and students and parents, caregivers, and students are walking to school together. And again, it's just another great activity to support walking and rolling, and also that community connectedness piece. This is another example of a walking school bus program. It was actually, I think it was a Walking Wednesdays program that was organized by high school students. So that's another engagement opportunity to have high school students participate in some of these programs and lead a training or lead an activity. High school students like to lead things, some might need community service. So that's another group to tap into when running your program. There are also bike rodeos. So again, just teaching students about different bike skills, having a bike course. These are some pre-K students who are doing a little bike course. So those are a lot of fun and a nice, safe and controlled environment for people to learn about, biking and, kind of the rules of the road, and even safety awareness demonstrations. So sometimes we know that there are serious safety concerns and people want to get out and demonstrate what those safety concerns are, and kind of flex their advocacy hat and show local leaders that there's something that needs to be changed or addressed. So again, these are some students who are here in DC who they wanted a crosswalk in front of their school because there wasn't one. One of their local elected officials decided to organize a safety demonstration in collaboration with the students and school staff. So they went out and had banners and talked to people who were driving by, and they didn't get a crosswalk, but I think they did get some sort of signal around their school to make traveling to the school campus easier. So even that could be an activity. Kind of advocating for safety changes and improvements. So I mentioned before, we have a lot of resources on our website, some in this presentation, others that I'll share out. If you are interested in walking school bus programs, we do have a full guide about how to start a walking school bus program. We also have a companion guide for how to get a bike train rolling in your school. So if that's something that might be, enticing, these are two great resources on our website. We also have some information just about, messaging to safe route messaging around safe routes to school. This might be a concept or a program that a lot of people don't necessarily know about. So just how do you talk about safe routes to school to people? How do you get people on board and excited and, getting people to support you? Even just trying to get schools and school administrators on board, people who don't have a lot of time to think about, school safety. How can you create some messaging that'll really get them excited and enthusiastic about the program? We have a walk audit tool, so how to plan for a walk audit. So, if you're somebody who wants to, maybe you do want to focus on some infrastructure program and want to see what those different gaps in infrastructure are, or where there's opportunities are, conducting a walk audit might be a really good first step for doing that. We also have a lot of communities who are doing these pop-up safe routes to school projects, so trying out some infrastructure changes or trying out, closing down a street during the school dismissal for kids to be able to walk and roll safely. We have some materials around pop-up projects as well. I feel like that's a big one that's been coming up a lot, especially, kind of post height of the pandemic. People have all these different creative and innovative ideas for pop-up projects. So definitely check that out as well. And we also have all of our webinars archived on our website. So if there's a topic that you want to learn more about, we probably have a webinar recording somewhere on our website about it, or a resource that we can provide to you. So I definitely go and take a look in our webinars archive and just see what's there. If there's a topic that you missed, if you can't find something, please feel free to reach out to us and we can point you in the direction where you need to go, but take a look at that. And we also have a Safe Routes to School Google group. It's like our Safe Routes to School listserv, and in our e-news. So our e-news is just like our regular newsletter we send out with different updates on Safe Routes to School, different webinar opportunities, cool things that are going on. So I definitely recommend signing up for our e-newsletter, and I'll send the link out as well for that. And then the listserv, like I mentioned, so it's a Google group where people can go and sign up and ask questions about Safe Routes to School. It's a really great and helpful community. So somebody might go on the listserv and say, how do I get a crossing guard program started in my school? Or how do I get a walking school bus program up and running? And like 10 people respond with different resources and ideas and links. And it's just a great kind of like learning and sharing community. So if you're interested in signing up for our listserv, you can send me your email address and we can get you added to that list. It's been very lively lately, so it's a good time to get in and see all the new ideas that are happening. And lastly, like I mentioned, our building blocks toolkit, I talked about this at the top of the webinar, and that is on our website as well. And again, that's really the step-by-step guide for how to get your program up and running. So it'll go into a lot more detail with some of the things I mentioned today, whether it's just general information, some activity planning, action planning, all of that is in the building blocks guide. So I'm going to pause here and see if there are any final questions. I know we covered a lot today, but I want to make sure that I can answer some of your questions. So Lynn was asking, who initiates the program? School, agencies? That's a great question. So basically, anybody can initiate a program. Some programs start with community members saying, we want a Safe Routes to School program, and they might work with the school or their local DOT or a local agency to get something up and running. Sometimes an agency will apply for a grant or have funding that's available to start a Safe Routes to School program. So it really depends on the situation and kind of what's happening on the ground in your community. But we've seen programs start a number of ways. A lot of programs actually start just by getting grant funding to get a program up and running. So there's no right or wrong way to do it. It does not have to come from a local agency. It can actually come from a parent group, caregiver group, student groups. Sometimes it's even more effective because it's showing that it's something the community really wants or needs. So I would say, yeah, it doesn't have to come from like an official agency. And somebody just asked, what is a walk or bike audit? So again, that's kind of taking a walk or roll around the street or around a few streets in your community to see what to assess the infrastructure and the level of safety and comfort as far as walking and biking is concerned. So you might take a walk around a neighborhood and we'll note down where there are cracks in the sidewalk, where there aren't sidewalks, where lighting might be an issue, where there aren't crosswalks, where there are things that might be infrastructure that might be falling apart, where there are bike lanes or aren't bike lanes. So it's just taking a look at the street around you or streets around you and determining what makes it easier or what makes it difficult for people to walk or roll. And then you document all of that and you can take it to a DOT or a school and use it to either advocate for a Safe Routes to School program or advocate for an infrastructure improvement. And it's another way to kind of like collect evidence that a Safe Routes to School program or project is needed in that community. Like I mentioned, I'll share the link to our walk audit and bike audit planning toolkit. So you can take a look at that, and it gives you different ideas for setting up your walk audit, different tools, different templates. It's a really comprehensive resource if that's what you're interested in. Any other questions? Somebody asked a question about grant funding. You probably need to be a nonprofit or government agency. I'd say that it definitely doesn't hurt to be a nonprofit or government agency to get a grant for safe routes to school. But again, this can be done in lots of different ways. I wouldn't want to have that be a deterrent as far as getting funding for safe routes to school. I would actually, probably just start by seeing if you could connect with the local nonprofit or government agency, or even a school district or school to see if there's any funding available. And also, like I mentioned earlier, like you can start a safe routes to school program at a school level. It doesn't have to be working in multiple schools with a large budget. It can be doing some activities in an individual school. So I wouldn't let that be a deterrent. Any last questions? I know that we are at the top of the hour. We covered a lot, but I really appreciate you all being here. I appreciate all your questions. If we didn't get a chance to answer your question, we'll save the chat, but also please feel free to reach out afterwards. I know this is just a very general introduction into the safe routes to school world. We'd be happy to talk more in depth with you anytime if you have additional questions or need more resources. We are here to help. So with that, I wish you all a good afternoon. I'm assuming it's afternoon or early afternoon somewhere, wherever you are. Thanks again for joining us. I will send out the presentation slides and the recording and also a survey so you can let us know how we did today and if there's anything else you'd like to hear about in this webinar series. So thank you all so much and enjoy the rest of your day, and we will be in touch soon. Have a good one.